I'll just say it straight up. Movement saved my life. I battled with depression as a kid, and then that depression sort of manifested itself into an addiction. I was totally in the throes of substance abuse from the age of 12 to about 23.
Michael, welcome to the show, man. I'm so stoked that you're decided to be on and to be part of this conversation and to jump on the podcast of Therapy for Dads. Before we jump into the topic though, like, how's your day going? Where are you at right now?
Where am I at? My day is winding down. It has been a pretty intense day so far. I was on a red eye, lots of turbulence, landed at 6:15 in the morning, got to my car in New York City, drove 2.5 hours up to my office in Hudson, New York. And I've been working all day on the computer, and I took a nice little walk this afternoon, and I've been looking forward to this conversation to sort of end cap my workday. And then I'm going to go home and see my wife and kids that I haven't seen in 48 hours. I'm excited to see them.
Yeah. And I bet they are too, to see dad come home, right?
I'd hope so.
You know, how are they greeting you these days when they haven't seen you in a while, your kids? Are they like, Dad's home, and running and jump and hug you, or what are they doing?
You know, well, if it's longer than if it's like a normal day at work, they don't run to the door and scream, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." But if it's longer than a day, I get a grand welcome. It's lots of dad. I missed you. I love you. Big hugs, big kisses. And then they always say, "What did you bring home for us?"
So there's
they're looking for presents. They're looking for presents.
There's something. So you've developed a ritual, right, of return when you've been gone longer than a day?
Well, I would say every 3 times I come home with some kind of, gift for them, and they would love it if it was every time. But
nice. Well, yeah, you've had a long 48 hours, and I'm stoked for you as a dad as well, for you to be able to get home to your family. But you said something earlier, and those that don't know, we met through social media. I've touted this on social media. There's a lot of things that I think are not so healthy in social media for different reasons, but a lot of cool things is meeting incredible people like Michael and reaching out and connecting and seeing that other people care about men and fathers and want to help from their area of expertise and their own story. And so something you said, which is the topic of today, is that you went for a walk after some of your work day and then sat down for this conversation. And so that walk is movement, and that is the topic of today, the power of movement, of physical movement. So can you talk a bit about your journey on this of movement? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll just say it straight up. Movement saved my life. I battled with depression as a kid, and then that depression sort of manifested itself into an addiction to. I was totally in the throes of substance abuse from the age of 12 to about 23, and and at first that the discovery for me at a young age was probably saved my life, actually, because it was something that I could actually dive into. I felt safer in my own skin when I found drugs and alcohol. And for a while it worked really well. And then it didn't, and then it became a real problem. What helped me come out of that about 19 years ago, I'll be celebrating 19 years in recovery in about a week and a half. I was introduced to movement, to fitness. I mean, obviously I was introduced to a community of people in the world of recovery. So I owe my life to that, really, first and foremost, right? Like, I think community is a very, very big deal for anybody struggling with anything, good or bad. You can find communities in bad places too. That tends to be somewhat of a thing. But community in opening doors for me has been sort of typically a first step, right? Like finding a community of people that you can identify with, and that ultimately was the sober community for me when I first made the decision to change. And then very quickly I was introduced to a couple of guys who were passionate about movement, and they said, "All right, man, you're 23 years old, you got a lot of life left ahead of you. We're going to teach you a new way to live." And it really involved fitness and nutrition, and then ultimately mindfulness practices, spirituality, stuff like that. But it really did start with movement for me. And so I would just tell anybody listening to the podcast, or, it doesn't matter if addiction or, if that's not part of your story. I strongly believe in my heart of hearts that movement, it might not be the absolute solution, but I could guarantee you from my experience that movement is certainly part of the story of freedom.
Yeah. And hearing that bit of your story, briefly, that where you came from, that even, a little sidestep, that even finding the use of addiction things was a way where you found safety at 12. And that was kind of, you found my guess is a community of people or something doing that, which enabled you to have some sense of agency and control from an environment that wasn't so safe. And hearing it said that way, you don't hear that very often of people framing it that way of, actually, I felt safer here than I did here. And then through that story, obviously, we come to movement. But can you speak a little bit about that, kind of that safety in the addiction, or versus how it was, whether your other environments, like a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, I had a pretty traumatic childhood that involved a very, very challenging relationship with my father. My father was, he wasn't diagnosed because he never went to a facility that would have diagnosed him. He refused to go into any kind of treatment. But my father was most likely bipolar. And then as he got older, I believe paranoid schizophrenic. His sister is paranoid schizophrenic in her 70s. She had a nervous breakdown, and she is basically dealing with a severe case of schizophrenia. And so I think that my father probably had a similar mental health stuff, but unfortunately he was not on any medication for it, and it was projected pretty much onto me. And so my father and I fought a lot from when I was a very young kid. And so, I did not feel safe in my own home. I did not feel safe in my own home. I was an escape artist from as early as I can remember. I was always trying to stay at my friends' houses. And then, when I was 12 years old, I really wanted to get his attention. I did not want to die, but I wanted to make I wanted to throw my flag in the ground that I wanted attention and help. And so I cut my wrists in front of my father. And I didn't get the response that I was hoping for. He kicked the shit out of me. And then at that point, the child services were involved, and I was admitted to Pain Winnie Mental Institution in New York City to get evaluated. And I told them emphatically that this was not me trying to commit suicide. This is me trying to tell my father, I've had enough, and I want love from you, and I'm not getting it. And maybe this will shake the tree enough to have you give me a hug and tell me you love me.
Wow.
But ultimately it didn't.
Wow.
And so I was really sad. It was a sad time in my life. And I found a group of kids that were a little bit older than me. And they, I'd already been smoking cigarettes at that point, and they were smoking weed, and then very quickly doing other drugs that I felt like, holy smokes, wait, I don't have to think about this part of my life all the time now. Now I can actually, it was a self-medication,
Some relief a bit.
Yeah, it was relieving for sure. Because not only did I feel like a relief from my own thoughts, but I also was with people that were also medicating, and it was fun for everyone. And it was a lot of kids that were struggling, that had, tough home situations. And so for, probably 5 or 6 years, it was like, it really did a good job. And I'm not trying to promote it.
No. And what I'm hearing is it helped you survive. Like you said, it got you to, I'm not hearing promotion. What I'm hearing is a kid looking for something outside of threat and harm, and found it in, which happens in your case, in another community, and happened to be also using drugs, which the reality is it does have elation and euphoria. So that's going to feel much better and distract from all the pain. So that makes, to me, not just as a person, yes, I'm also a therapist, but as a person, it makes sense. And my heart goes out. I can only imagine a 12-year-old kid. What do you do? I got to get out of here. So this feels better. So to me, it makes sense. I'm not hearing you promote it at all, man. I'm hearing this authenticity of this is what it did for me at the time. And I needed something. And this community provided something that I needed that I wasn't getting here, that I should have had. So I can't even imagine. You found something.
Yeah, I found it and it worked, and I hung my hat on it for a while, and then unfortunately it stopped working. But at that point I was already relying on it, and so it's kind of like imagine, walking with a cane for 5-6 years that really helped, kept you up. Like, you knew you'd lean on that cane and you weren't going to fall. That cane was holding you up, and you were like, oh, thank God I've got this cane. I've been falling for a while. Now I got the cane to hold me up. And then all of a sudden, 5 years in, the cane just stops holding you up, and so you still have the cane because you think it's still going to hold you up, but really you just keep falling and falling. And that was kind of like what it felt like after, in my late teens and early 20s, it was, the cane didn't work anymore. I found a bigger cane. The bigger cane didn't work anymore. And, it was a do or die period of time for about 3 years for me, where I was really struggling with trying to come out of that lifestyle. And I knew that it was, friends of mine were dying around me. And I knew that it was like, it wasn't an if, it was a when or change. And so I got very lucky. And it's so interesting, I was actually writing a blog post because this time of year for me, July 20, between July 20th and August 2nd, this was the darkest few weeks of my life 19 years ago. This was like the bottom of the barrel. This is when it was hot in New York City. I was hopeless. I had zero respect for myself, zero self-care, self-love, and at the same time, zero interest in anything aside from myself, so it was like unbelievable selfishness, but with zero self-esteem. And it was a really hard time. So I get a little kind of funky right now, just in general, because I do kind of go back there and I'm like, wow, like the guy that you're talking to right now is the same human being as that person was, but like worlds of different character traits today,
Yeah. I mean, with that said, I appreciate you even having this conversation during this kind of anniversary, so to speak.
It's a funky time because there is a fair amount of reflection, but it's not actually it's not a hard time. It's a real time of gratitude for me. Like, I really get deep into reflection, but also the ramifications of that reflection is immense gratitude for where I know I was. It's not a story that I've written. It really happened, and to where I am now. Right. And so I guess the message there is, holy smokes, anyone can change.
Yeah. That's a powerful message. Anyone can change. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with that, I'm wondering, you're in this dark phase 19 years ago, and you're painting a very visceral picture, hot in New York. I mean, I was even getting a sense of like, okay, you're struggling. And so how did you get from there to getting into, because you got to movement, but you did some other movement to get to the movement that you're gonna talk more about. But how did you get from that point to, like, what did something click? Like, what happened of that shift of you of like, I need to now get help or do something different because what I'm doing isn't working?
Yeah, I mean, look, I had been playing this tape in my head for a while at this point, right? Like, it was like, all right, man, you're gonna either change. Like, the conversation in my head was basically like, all right, man, is today gonna be the day, or are you gonna take another risk? Like, oh, is today gonna be the day? Or are you going to run the risk of losing it all or dying, and so that tape was like kind of on repeat in my head at this time, 19 years ago. Like, I knew that it was like a very pivotal moment. It was either I was going to OD and die because I had already OD'd and it was very close, or I was going to make the change. And it was Monday, August 2nd, not very different than most days that most days I'd be up until 8 o'clock in the morning from the night before, on drugs and alcohol with people. This day happened to be, I think it was like a 48-hour run. I was not ready to stop. I knew I had work. I worked in a restaurant, so I had work that Monday. And the guys that I was with had said, we're calling it a night. And I wasn't ready to call it. But they left, and I made my way. We were on the roof of my apartment building. I made my way down to my apartment, and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I was disgusted with myself. The thought of suicide really was very, very prevalent in my mind at that moment. I remember sitting on the floor of my bedroom contemplating, like, what would be a dramatic way to go out so that people would feel bad for me, or people would feel for me. I wanted people to feel for me. You know, I hadn't had that in a long time. And I passed out. I passed out. And I passed out for 16 hours. I slept right through work. I woke up late that night. It was probably 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was probably whatever it was, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning the next day. And I knew that was it. That was it. I knew I had lost my job. I was positive that I was going to lose my job. My boss actually at the time was integral in helping me get sober. He fired me, and then he made me an ultimatum about getting sober. And I knew that it was coming. And so I had that. I was disgusted with myself, but I knew. And there was like this little moment of grace where I felt like I had the courage to go and ask for help. And so I called the right person, and the right person was dating one of the two guys that would really come to my rescue and help me find a life of better. And I reached out to Karen. She was sober. She was like an older sister to me who had taken me in, but she was also an addict and an alcoholic for years. And, you know, but she had she called her boyfriend Marcus at the time and said, "Hey, I've got a friend who really could use some help." And so he came to my apartment, showed up, and I had, you know, we had that morning went out for a cup of coffee, and he said, you gotta go to a meeting, man. You gotta. This is, you know, I'm not going to tell you that there's an easy way here, you know, like you're just going to have to succumb. And I did. And he saw that I was doing it. And so he started to spend more time with me. And then he took me to a Muay Thai kickboxing gym. He was a competitive Muay Thai fighter. And he said, "This is the deal, man." And it was him and this other guy, Gavin. And they were both like 10 years older than me. But for whatever reason, these guys took a liking to me, and I got very lucky. I was the beneficiary of their kindness, and I was also ready. I was ready, right? Like they didn't force me to do anything. They didn't make me do anything. I was ready for receiving what they had to offer at that time in my life, and I was lucky for that, because I can't remember another time when I felt I was like ready like I was then. And so I can't tell you exactly what it was that made me feel that courage or have the courage, but I will tell you that there was, you know, it wasn't possible without some courage. And they said, "All right, so this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna wake up as early as you can, and that could be 5 o'clock in the morning, or that could be 9 o'clock in the morning, but we just want you to wake up as early as you can. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to ask the universe for help. That could be God, that could be Jesus, that could be Allah, that could be whatever you want it to be, but you're just going to ask for help because you don't know how to ask for help. You haven't been able to ask for help in a long time. So if you can ask for help first thing in the morning from a power that you can't describe, that could be a great way to get you into the habit of asking for help from others. So you ask for help first thing in the morning, then you're going to go for a walk or a run. Ideally, you're taking a jog. That jog could be a block. It could be 2 blocks. It could be a mile. It could be 10 miles. But we want you to pray, and then we want you to go take a run. And then when you're done with that run, we want you to have a big fat bowl of oatmeal. And then we want you to go to a meeting and you know, start connecting with other people in recovery, and then come straight to the gym. And we're going to kick your ass, and we're going to teach you how to have some integrity, and we're going to start to help you build confidence, and we're going to teach you how to get knocked down but get back up. And then you're going to have lunch, and you're going to go home, you're going to take a nap, and then you're going to go to work, and you're going to work, and you're going to try to go to bed as early as you can, and you're going to rinse and repeat, and you can do that over and over and over again. And that's what started my journey. And I became obsessed with being better. And it really did, you know, the beauty of movement is it's something that you can control. And once you make the decision to do it, you've won. You've won already. Once you've made the decision to do it, you've won. So even if you make the decision and you get out there and you don't go as far as you had planned to go, you've won, because you've accomplished something that you committed to, be it even just for, you know, a short-term commitment. You said, this is something I'm going to do. You go do it. Now you've committed. That's a win. And it feels good. And ultimately that commitment just grew and grew and grew for me. And, you know, I ended up competing in Muay Thai. I ended up running marathons. I was, you know, I became passionate about bodybuilding, and I became a pro bodybuilder, you know. So like movement is a massive part of my mental health medicine. It is my mental health medicine, along with a lot of self-development work that I've done over the years. And obviously the community in recovery. I'm nothing without my recovery, my sobriety. Yeah. So
It really kicked off everything, that you had this
Yep.
moment. And I've heard stories too that, we always try to identify what was that moment. But a couple things that stood out to me was, one, you got to this place of readiness, whatever that looked like. And it's different for every person. And then you had people around you. That was, I think, key, that you had someone to call and then they met you where you were. And that stood out to me in your story. And then you began basic movement and doing little things, little changes, and consistency, creating a habit, and did that over and over and over again. And that was kind of like the beginning. And it sounds like your movement, it started in one way, but now it's expanded in so many different ways from, 19 years ago to, who Michael is today. And so I'm wondering, with movement, how has movement, looking at your journey from how you started, and you kind of sprinkled in some other things you've been doing now. And I'm wondering, what does movement do maybe specifically for you as a man from day to day? How does it impact you as a father? And how does it help you navigate and take care of your kind of holistic mental health? Not necessarily mental illness, but your health, your level of health. What are you seeing it practically day to day do for you?
Well, I think if you really peel it back and sort of try to understand some core primal accomplishments or acknowledgments for hundreds of thousands, however long we've been standing on 2 feet, we were designed to move. We were not designed to sit. We were not designed to be sedentary beings. We were designed to move, right? Like, it's just that simple. And so for thousands of years, we correlate movement to life, right? Like, if you didn't move 50,000 years ago, you're dead. You're going to get eaten by the saber-toothed tigers, And so there's a real sort of this like mental core, this like mental that has been ingrained, I believe. And this is sort of like a philosophy of mine, but I've really tried to understand and dissect why the dopamine and serotonin is so strong on a run, for instance. Why do I feel a sense of euphoria almost? The thought of going for a run, so that's the dopamine, building up the anticipation of like, okay, I'm going to go for this run. It's going to be a 5-mile run. Starting to feel my body begins, the nervous system, kicks on, borderline fight or flight, you're in that spot, and then you're there, and then you're out and you're doing it. And you've won. You're in the act of running. For me, that's one of my favorite ways to move, and it's a primal feeling of joy. I think it's something that has been hardwired into our makeup to want to move and appreciate what that movement does for us, even biologically. And so I think there's not only a science component to it, but there's also an ego esteem component to it, right? And the ego could also be what prevents us from going. The ego could be like, you don't need to do that. That's not, no, you've already done it. You've done enough today. Like, you've worked hard. You've got a lot of email. You bang, like, that could be the ego in your way. And then, for me, what's really sort of kicked my ego in the butt, because my ego is definitely not something that I want to completely get rid of, because I do, I think ego does carry some weight in the positive life that I lead today. But, for years, my ego really did try to suppress my ability to push as hard as I felt like I needed to push to accomplish what I wanted to get. Sometimes my ego would tell me, that's that other voice that says, like, you don't have to. It's okay. You can have that. You deserve that. You deserve that extra scoop of chocolate, mousse tracks. So, I think movement weighs so heavy on my mental health, and I can tell you that for sure, because I am dealing with a case of sciatica right now that I've been dealing with for 6-7 weeks. It's gotten a lot better. Thank gosh for that, but it's taken me out. I have not been able to move like I like to move. I have not gone on a run in almost 2 months. I am not lifting heavy weights, which I love to do. It's put me in a position as to really, really like do some searching and some, hey man, like, it's really powerful how much movement means to me as a man, a father, I'm a better person when I'm consistently moving. I just am. And I'm not saying that now in the last 6 weeks I've been a bad dude, but I'm here to say that like, and it's been a really interesting time for me in this because I've come to terms with this idea that like, hey man, it's amazing when you can do it. You need to be unbelievably grateful for the many, many years you've had being able to do whatever you want in movement. But it's also, your body is right now telling you something as well, which is it's also okay to slow down, man.
That sounds like wisdom is kicking in.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It's okay to slow down. Slow is also fast, bro. And that's where I'm at. So I've been going. It's been a very interesting time for me because I train 5-6 days a week. It's how I've lived my life for a long time, and now I'm not. And I haven't lost all the muscle that I've been building. I haven't I haven't put on 25 pounds of fat.
With the wisdom you have now, what do you do now? And maybe some practical things for dads listening or the ladies listening too, because they might say, oh, maybe my husband can do this. If you can't move as much, what else do you do to kind of help your health, internal health, emotional, mental health, when you can't have that same level? What do you do now to kind of supplement or add into, or that you do?
Well, so something that I think is really, really important to mention. So, I'm an athlete, right? It's that I have fallen in love with athletics and that's certainly not for everyone. Walking is arguably one of the greatest forms of movement, if not the greatest all-time form of movement, honestly. Walking is something that when you live in a geographically metropolitan setting, walking is a lot easier to do than if you live in the suburbs or if you live in a rural part of the country. That said, just because it's not easy doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. And so I live in a rural part of the country now. I live in upstate New York. I can't walk from my house to my office or to the gym or, I have to intentionally schedule a 45-minute walk into my day every day, if not more, because I really do love walking. I get very, very similar outcomes for my mental health by just walking 45 minutes as I could in the gym getting after it for an hour. And so for anybody listening that's like, yeah, well, like I don't lift weights, or I don't do, I don't run marathons, or if you don't walk right now, if walking is just not part of your life, you walk from, your house, your front door to your car to the office, your office back to the car back to your house. If that is the extent of your walking, I would put almost everything I own on the fact that if you started walking for a half an hour a day and you did that 5 days a week, the space that you would create in between your own two ears, the mental clarity, the space, the freedom that you would create would be unbelievable. You wouldn't believe it. In just 30 minutes of walking a day, 5 days a week, if you're not walking right now. And so that it is a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful tool.
And accessible, and it's cheap. It doesn't cost a lot, right? It's not like it's a lot of money to go outside and walk for half an hour. Some of the research would say that, just as you pointed out, that walking does provide a lot of time to clear your head and reflect and almost problem solve too. There's a technique of like, just go outside and walk for 10, 15 minutes, even that, just to like get out of it and start to come down. For example, if you're having maybe a heated moment with your kids or your spouse or something, and you're kind of getting frustrated, just go and leave and walk, come back in 10, 15 minutes. It's amazing what you would come back to. Almost, you said it, you're regulating your nervous system, coming down and get some clarity to be like, okay, I'm cooled off. I can now think a little more rationally and be more collected and kind of use my inner wisdom to make a better decision here to be more effective.
I just have to say this. I had a really amazing conversation with a therapist, a child therapist, on Wednesday. Today's Friday. And she was actually a guest on my podcast. And she said something to me that was so profound. She said that our children at a young age, infant age, are reading our nervous system. They're incredibly sensitive to our nervous system. I had never heard it explained that way, but it makes total sense that they're not able to communicate. So one of their senses is really sort of eliminated. And so they're highly adaptive in other ways because they're beings, they're alive, right? And so their ability to pick up on our body language, I think she said the amygdala. What is that part of the brain?
Yeah, the amygdala, which is the kind of the hindbrain. Yeah,
is constantly scanning
cues of threat or safety.
Exactly. And I was like, wow, like that description, because it's so interesting. And I don't ever, I mean, I'm a father of two kids, right? But I've also had dogs my whole life for the most part. And dogs, you know, if you ever listen to like Cesar Millan, you know, his whole thing is controlling of your posture and your mannerisms and your gestures. In other words, your nervous system. Yeah. How calm are you in leading your animal? Because anxiety, any sign of that is going to ultimately, it's contagious. It literally, they communicate like someone else's nervous system is going to very, very quickly respond to what your nervous system is dealing with. And I was like blown away by that.
It skips verbal because that part of our brain, our vagal nerve, which kind of goes from the bottom of our brainstem down into our heart and back again, which controls our nervous system states, sympathetic, parasympathetic states, fight, flight. Then it's always, you're right, it's always scanning, and it's not necessarily now language can modify, but before language, it's tone, body posture, it's a felt sense. It's kind of in the gut and the body, and so you read the room, and so. Just like Cesar Millan and the dog, same thing. They pick it up, and you don't have to even say a word. Words add, like I said, they can add color or shape, but which is why your kids pick up everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, whether you want them to or not, whether you try and shield them or not, they're going to pick it up. So it's not like I'm saying this not to freak out, like, oh my gosh, my kids are picking everything up. Scratch that from your head. It's not like you have to be so hyper aware because then you're going to be anxious, but it's more about, are you calm? Are you collected? Because if you come home from a stressful work day, and you walk in the door and you see your kids and you're stressed out, they're going to pick that up. Now, they may not be able to say it with language, Dad, you're stressed, but they're going to pick it up. It's going to impact their nervous system to some degree because they're going to have a felt sense of you walking in the room. And so with you, when you have those moments with your kids, I'm wondering, with that awareness, like when you have an awareness that maybe you're stressed out or having a hard time and you come in and you're at home with your family, anything you do that kind of resets you in the moment, like a quick thing or a couple things that you help you kind of reset and kind of get back to a grounded space?
Big time. I can't say I do it every day, but I would say probably 3 to 4 days a week, because it's not every day that I feel like I'm coming home with an intensity or an anxiety that I'm not happy with. But they're, you know, work energy. I'm the CEO of my company. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm constantly juggling, although I've gotten way better at understanding that I can't get it all done in a day. So like I don't take on all that anxiety as much as I used to. But every day I get my car at around 5:20 at my office, which is about 20 minutes from my house, 25 minutes from my house. And I drive home. And right as I get to my driveway, I pull my car in enough so that if the kids are running around up at the house, they don't see me, but enough so that I don't get hit by cars coming down my road. I pull into the driveway and I shut my car off and I take a deep breath. I close my eyes and I do a breathwork practice, because about 1.5 years ago, I did not have any sort of transitional habits from work to family, work to father, husband life, because they're very different energies, or at least I'd like them to be very different energies. And a lot of fathers, mothers don't actually have a boundary there or separate that energy. And I think it's really important to do that. And I didn't know that until my son taught me an invaluable lifelong lesson. And I walked into the house. I was pretty stressed out. I had my phone in my hand just like this. And I was on an email, and I was trying to get this email out before dinner, and I knew, I was stressing. And my son was talking to me, and he was trying to say, hey, Dad. And I just walked into the house. My son was excited to see me. And I had that energy. And I looked at him and I said, don't you see I'm doing something? And I caught myself in that moment where my son, children of all age, I don't think it ever ends, right? My sons want two things in the world. That's it. Really. They want the attention from my wife and my attention.
Yeah.
They want me to see them.
Yeah.
That's all they want. They want our attention. They want to feel our love. really, when you really boil it down. And so for me, I had this flash in my head. I was like, oh my God, the one thing that my son wants, I'm not giving him because I'm caught up in a fucking email. Are you serious? Michael, are you serious? How could you possibly think that's okay?
Wow.
And that was the last time that happened. So now I have a transition period in the driveway where I do some breath work. And that breath work typically is either 5 rounds of box breathing or 5 rounds, depending on how intense the stress is. Because sometimes, you know, I come home with anxiety, especially this year was a really hard year for me at work. Like I could feel the anxiety in my chest. And I'll have to do a bit more of an intense breath work cycle, which is like this double inhale, long, slow exhale. And I'll do that 5 to 10 times. And if I still feel a little above ground with, you know, I will do both of those exercises together. And sometimes it takes 3 minutes, sometimes it takes 10. But I will ground myself and get back to baseline before I get into that house. And as soon as I'm in there, my phone is on airplane mode and it's face down on the kitchen counter. And I don't pick it up for 2.5 hours until they're asleep.
I thank you for that, the very practical breath work. And I know those breath work exercises. I do them as well. And I teach them to most, if not all, my clients. And I think it's so practical that taking that extra, 3 minutes can make a world of difference when you walk in that home, 3 to 5, which is not that much time to kind of ground yourself. But I think the thing I heard that really stood out to me, and I'm hearing your story, is that you had a realization with your son that maybe triggered your own, you tell me, I'm just guessing here hypothetically, but I'm getting a sense that in a way that what you needed from your father, or when you were staying in that room after you cut your wrists, you needed his attention. Maybe that part of you felt that pain when your son needed you on the email.
100%. Ripped open that shot a bit for me.
Because what I wanted from my father is just him to be present, to see it, and to be present and have his attention. And I'm doing this, and I am not doing that. And what shifted for you was, now the beautiful thing is you heard that message loud and clear, and you're like, no, I'm present with my kids. I'm going to give the gift of presence, in a way, healing that part of myself, that child that needed it from my father, and giving it to them. And I get to see that every day of giving that and seeing the impact it has on my kids' lives. Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, when I really opened the floodgates, I wanted my father's approval.
Yeah.
I never got it. He's dead, I never got it. But I battled with a lot of things, and even, I mean, I'm the founder of a number of companies. I've sold companies, I've built companies. I've had a lot, I've done a lot of things. And I honestly, I have a drive and an ambition that was developed because I don't believe I'm ever going to get my father's approval. And so I need to constantly, and I'm aware of this, but I constantly am in pursuit of better. And, my father comes to visit me in my dreams, and it's really interesting. And I don't want to say this and people be like, "Oh God, here we go." But that's actually the truth. I've had a number of conversations with my father in my dreams that have awarded me the approval that I've been after. And when that happens, I journal about it, and it's pretty cool.
What we do in EMDR is very similar to that. You imagine a different outcome, and that can have a very healing, powerful physiological effect on your body, on your mind, and on your soul. There's some of the things we do, but essentially that sounds very, to me, again, I'm a trained clinician who does this, so I'm like, oh, that sounds totally kind of what I do. But anyone else might think, oh, this is hocus pocus stuff. I'm like, no, actually, the power of healing what the mind and body can do, whether it happened or not, the brain doesn't determine whether it's true or if you imagine it happening, because your physiological response is the same.
Yeah, I woke up very happy, that I had that conversation. And this dream, I had a recent dream, which was really weird because I don't play golf. I got invited to go play a round of golf that I hadn't swung a golf club in 30 years. And the night before I went to play golf, I had a dream of my father. Now, it could be because it could be that I had a dream about my father, and he had come and had a conversation with me, and he told me how happy he was with my success. But it could be that I was playing a game of golf, and because it reminded me of him potentially, that's why I had a dream about him. who knows? But I will tell you that I woke up and I felt like I had a conversation with my father, who's been dead for 22 years.
That went well. Wow.
And he told me he was happy with me. It was a good chat.
And it's amazing how the body can find healing. And as I'm thinking about this, as we come to a close here, because I'm aware of the time, your journey, in the short time that we've had this conversation, the journey from a kid who desperately just wanted attention from his father, who found a path to get out of it and find safety through a different type of movement, I would say, but still movement nonetheless. Then found himself 19 years ago in a place of needing a different type of movement, found that, coming all the way back to then that story of your son, of the recognition of what it really coming back to, like where it all started was just connection and attention from your parent, from your dad, from your mom, and then able to give that to your kid and be present and finding healing in that's what stood out to me. Is like, if I were to put a bookend on it, it's like, you said it yourself at the very beginning, movement saved your life. And hearing the story, I'm like, yeah, it totally did. That movement got you, not only saved your life, but got you to a place of giving your life away in a way that's powerful for your kids, and a way healing them, that generational curse, whatever you want to call it, trauma from the past, of like, you get to give such an amazing gift to your kids. So that when they're telling a story, maybe one day on a podcast, it'll be very different. It'll be like, no, my dad was there. I felt loved and connected to my father. And that's such an incredible gift, man.
The cool thing about you just saying that, the feeling that I just got is I'm confident that that's what they would say. I'm confident. I mean, they're going to say that they run. They definitely lean on their mom for cuddling, even though I'm a good cuddler. But but I'm proud to say I'm a great father. And I don't think anybody would have really put that on me after seeing what it was like in my childhood, and then ultimately what my teenage years and early 20s looked like. So even that piece. Well, no, I mean, it's my greatest accomplishment.
What a way to end the show, man. Where can we find you? Where, if people are looking to get, you're the CEO of Creatures of Habit and some other things, where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, you could just find me on Instagram is really where I'm most active, at Michael Chernow. I'm also pretty active on TikTok, but Instagram and TikTok really are where I'm active. I share a lot about my life experience. I've gone through, a couple of different journeys in the world of social media, but I made a decision a few years ago to really not focus as much on my fitness and nutrition stuff, and really focus on sort of my mindset stuff, because I hope to be of service. Being of service has truly been where, when I am in service, I am at my best. And so instead of trying to show people my 8-pack, you know what I mean, on social media, I share about stories that I think could potentially touch one person a day, and so that's what I've been doing on social. So you can check me out there. Creatures of Habit is with a K. It's the company that I'm currently running. And, if you're in New York City and you want to grab a good bite to eat, you can go check out the Meatball Shop, as a business I launched a bunch of years ago. And then if you feel like having a good fish taco, there's a bunch of restaurants called Seymour's in New York City that are seafood.
I'm a little far away to
spots.
grab any of that food, but if I ever am, I will stop by. Michael, man, I really appreciate your vulnerability and just strength, and just sharing your story and the impact you're having, and your heart and your care and your passion, and just for being on here today. Even though you had a long 48 hours, I appreciate it. So blessings to you and your family, and for a wonderful evening with your family. And if anyone looking for some inspiration, go check him out. All the links will be in the bio and the description. Everything to find him they'll be clickable. And until then, man, have a great night.